do let them edit. So no problem if you want to be like, let's just take that part out. We'll be able to do that without a problem. Welcome to Coffee Conversations. I'm joined today with Patrick Jinks at the Jinks Perspective. Patrick has been working in nonprofit sector for more than 20 years as in executive leadership roles. And then he has also been doing consulting via the Jinks Perspective for nonprofit organizations, specifically in the areas of strategic planning and leadership coaching. So welcome, Patrick. I appreciate you being here today.
Good morning. Thanks. I have my coffee too.
Yes. Oh, we both do. So we'll get our little morning Joe in. So I would love just briefly to share with everyone before you start telling us all the amazing things you have to tell us about mission and evaluation of mission performance, measuring that. I would love to talk briefly about your experiences, because I have a lot of really great guests come on Coffee Conversations with a variety of backgrounds. And I think we've got something really special here today with you. Not only are you a published author, but you have been featured on a variety of really large national network programs for all of your services that you provide. You're a member of the Forbes Coaches Council, as well as a past president of the Blue Ridge Institute, which those folks that are in the nonprofit sector know very well. So I really appreciate you being here today and being able to share your wisdom, so that many of us think that your level of executive coaching and your level of services is really kind of out of reach. And I know we spoke briefly before we started the program about that and about leadership coaching and executive directors not thinking that's available to them. So here we get you for free for about 20 to 30 minutes. So thanks for coming. So talk to me about your services that you provide to clients, what that looks like, and kind of your values system, if you will.
Wow. Well, thank you. And you said some good things there, particularly around the idea that a lot of nonprofit leaders would maybe assume that executive coaching, not necessarily me, but just that executive coaching, that sounds so luxurious, like that's out of reach. That's really the issue around which I formed this business. And that's the mission bent, is to make world-class executive coaching like Fortune 500 company CEOs enjoy accessible to the social sector. And that's because I spent 20 years in the social sector and I know the need. I'm a coach before I'm a consultant. And nothing against consultants. I just play a coach better than I do a consultant. And the difference that I always say is that I don't come to my clients with answers and a bunch of recommendations and come in and assess what they need to do and then tell them what they need to do. I'm not an expert in their field. The coach comes with questions and the facilitative process to draw out and elevate the client's best thinking. And that's really what coaching is. It's another way that I describe it is that it's a forced pause. I love the fact that almost every week I hear one of my coaching clients, executives, say, this is really good. I just haven't really taken the time to pause on this. And it's some big leadership, meaningful thing that's important. And it's like, yeah, because we focus on our work and the tasks and the projects and the oversight and all that. And we forget that the job is not the work. The job is leadership. For a CEO, that is the job. So why don't we pause on leadership and create leader plans about how we're going to be an effective leader? And that's kind of what coaching is, a forced pause. The other thing I say it is that a coach does for a leader's mind a little bit like what a physical trainer does for an athlete's body. Okay. Let's stretch new muscle. Let's practice on the things that you want to work on. Is hand-eye coordination something we need to work on if you're a tennis player? Is it stamina if you're a marathon runner? Is it upper body strength? If you're a wrestler, like what is it you need to work on? That's what we ask the leader. And let's work on some things that will stretch that muscle and create some reps and drills. So the coach is not doing the heavy lifting. The coachee is doing the work. Right. And owning it. And as for the accessibility, and then I'll come up for air. As for accessibility, I try to strike a balance. This needs to be accessible, and it obviously is accessible, or I wouldn't have coached the hundreds of people, thousands of people that I've coached in the nonprofit sector. But I also don't want to, this isn't cheap, as in like, I don't want to cheapen the service
Yes.
because, and it's not because, my service is valuable. It's because if you don't have some investment and ownership and skin in the game, you might not take it as seriously. It is an investment. It is a critical part. Nonprofits spend tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars on relationship software and marketing efforts and finance audits and all these things. They don't spend money on leadership and strategy. And, that's a big part. In fact, it's kind of the overarching part. So I try to strike that balance of, yeah, it's an investment, but it is accessible. And I had a client ask me one time, or tell me that, boy, I need to take this to my board because I'm loving this conversation. I need to go convince my board that you're worth it. And I immediately stopped her and said, no, you need to go convince your board that they're worth it. You need to figure out if your organization is worth this investment. It's not about what I'm worth. It's about what you're worth in this kind of investment. So that's, and then my focus is on leadership, and both at the executive and at the lower levels, and strategy. So there's a lot of things around that, but those are the two sort of core parts of the work.
Well, and if I could pick the two things that are most often at the core of problematic situations at nonprofits, it's leadership or a lack of strategy.
A lack of strategy or poorly articulated strategy that
Yeah.
doesn't have traction that you're looking for. Yeah.
Yeah. Or just being underutilized,
Right.
whatever it may be. But, and I love what you said about the forced pause. I think that's my mantra in my business is that we're building capacity to dream our visions. We have to build space to be able to dream. And so if you don't have that forced pause, you can't kind of think bigger about how to create this solution to the societal problem that you're really trying to solve. So I really love that. Patrick, makes sense.
Well, it's well said. And you put even another application on it. Again, one of the areas of focus that I often find with my clients is, I want to read more and I want to research more in my field, but I just don't have the time. Or I want to plan. We want to be a better planning organization, but who has time to plan? And so what I try to help my coachees understand is that planning and research and reading, those are not things you do if you have time. Those are not things you do at home. That's part of the job. When I was in nonprofit leadership, I considered research to be part of my job. So, put it on your calendar for an hour to dig into something. And so, it's a small example, but it's another example of a forced pause. We have to force those things.
Agreed. But they're too busy fixing the plumbing, because we've got this charity mentality of that we've got to go, that we've got to go and make, save the $200 for the plumber and fix it ourselves, which I'm like, you're the executive who should be like high level thinking, trying to build this organization. But anyway,
it is, but so many of them have, like, when you say that, the empathetic side of me says a lot of the people I'm coaching, they might be the only staff person in the organization. True. Or they're one of maybe, they have 3 direct reports and one of them is part-time. And it's like, yeah, I'm the plumber.
Everybody's got to pull their weight.
Yeah. So it is a big challenge.
It is.
But a huge part of it is mindset, like you say.
Yeah. Yeah. So in addition to all these fabulous things that you've done and this record that you're coming to us with today, you are also in the process of getting your PhD, I believe. Did I understand that?
I'm done with that.
You're done.
Okay. Yeah. So graduated in December.
Yay, congratulations. As if you needed another accolade, but I bet it was just fun for you if I had to guess.
Sure.
Yeah. What did you get your PhD in?
Organizational leadership.
Excellent. So as part of your PhD, you did a dissertation on mission, in and around mission and mission evaluation and performance. And so talk to me a little bit about what that is and how you apply that. And that's probably a really big question if I had to guess.
Okay.
So we can break it down if you want.
It's perfect. I'll keep it as simple as I can. having spent the time that I've spent in the network, in the social sector around the country in a lot of different organizations, I had a set of experience, just like any scientist comes with this sort of hypothesis, right? And you say you want to remove bias, but I kind of had an observation and I wanted to test it. And my observation was that, among other things, that mission statements in the nonprofit sector in particular, because that's the focus, are mostly poorly written, and they're these nebulous, save the world, unmeasurable PR statements to put on a website. I'm exaggerating only maybe slightly, and maybe not even exaggerating.
No.
The research that I wanted to do was a little bit of a follow-up on some research that had been done here in South Carolina previously, some quantitative research that had been done on how many nonprofits say they do performance measurement. And the follow-up to this was, let's see if you can actually articulate some of this measurement. And so I came back with a qualitative study. And I interviewed 13 nonprofit CEOs anonymously and randomly across the state, and 90-minute interviews with each of them. And I dug deep into what it is in their organizations they measure. And really, long story short, we found that really organizations measure at 3 levels. Level 1 being everybody measures some kind of business metrics, like they know how much money they raised each year. Right? That's a metric. Or they know what their overhead percentage is. There's a formula for that. They measure it. Some of them might know their employee turnover rate or their customer satisfaction numbers or the businessy metrics that we all do. Then there's level 2, which is the outcomes of their various programs. So if I have an after-school mentoring program, am I measuring just how many people I'm mentoring, or am I measuring the difference that I'm actually making for those students? Are their grade point averages increasing? For example, that would be an outcome, whereas many nonprofits are stuck just measuring the outputs, the number, how many hours of tutoring and how many students and, all of that. Important, but not sufficient. Then there's level 3. And that was the place I was really focusing my study on, and that is the mission level measurement. So if my mission is to improve the world, how am I measuring that? What's my metric for being able to tell the public that's given me a public trust and a tax break for the mission promise I'm making? How do I have any evidence that points to the fact that I'm at least advancing that stated mission? That was the study. And then previous studies that have been done, which haven't been a whole lot, the literature out there is that not many of them can and do measure at that level in any form. My study affirmed that 3 of the 13 organizations that I interviewed were able to sort of articulate and produce what we would consider to be that mission level. They have mission statements that are conducive, first of all, to measurement, and they have some system or indication for what they're measuring that they can come back and say, here's our mission and here's the level to which we're achieving.
Wow. I mean, I immediately start thinking of mission statements how do you possibly measure many of these, and how do you show that impact? I mean, there's ways to show impact. I think that's the level 2, right? But then how do you take it to the next level of saying this is achieving our mission or getting us closer to that goal? And so do you work with nonprofits currently in helping them develop those obviously levels? Because I mean, I know I can think off the top of my head immediately some that don't even have level 1 measurements happening. So how do you work with them to develop those, and how do you drive conversations around level 3? Because that's big. You have to rewrite their missions potentially even.
Well, yeah, the answer is yes. I'm working with clients all the time on this. All 13 of the organizations I interviewed had pretty good level 1 metrics.
Okay.
And
you got to start there.
And about half of them, I think it was 7, had level 2, some form of level 2. And then, like I said, 3 of them at low. So as you go up the levels, it starts getting thinned out. The answer is yes, all the time, because I do strategic planning. And you can't do strategic planning until you start on what is our why, which is not mission. Why and purpose is more about the need you're meeting and the aspiration. The charge is the mission. The mission is the what. So this is the aspiration. Okay, what's our charge? What is the work we do in order to meet this need or achieve this aspiration, whichever framing you want to use. But the charge is the mission. It's the what. And you can't build a strategic plan until you've figured out that bigger what and why. And now you can say, okay, now what are going to be our primary methods and approaches for achieving that? So all the time, we start with, we test the mission, we vet it right up front. A part of our strategic planning process, you've probably been to these where you pull out the flip chart and say, okay, let's build a mission statement. And you go through this grueling wordsmithing and everybody disagrees, is it and or is it we or us? And so what I do in the coaching process, you just have deep conversations about who are you? What are you trying to achieve? What's this all about? Why was this formed? Why are you still here? What do you do that someone else doesn't do? And they have these conversations, and what they don't realize is they're talking mission and vision, but we're not saying, let's talk mission and vision.
Exactly.
We're just having a conversation. And then what I do is I reflect back to them what I'm hearing. And I say, so it sounds to me like this is what you're after, and this is your role in it. And they go, yeah, like that's way clearer than our current mission statement, So that's the process that we go through, because I always say you want to do vision building, not statement building.
Right.
And it's not about building the statement and getting the words just right so everybody agrees, and the semantics and the grammar and the PR value of it. It's about let's create the vision. We'll figure out the statement. We don't have to memorize a statement. I tell people it's more important to know your mission
Know it. Right.
than it is to know your mission statement.
That's right. Yeah. If you know it, you don't have to memorize the statement. It's just,
that's right.
It's what's at the heart of it all.
Yeah. And the other thing is it's your charge. So one of the things I've heard in board meetings is, boy, if we went out into the street and asked the average Joe, what's our mission? How many of them would know? And my answer is, who cares? It's not the average Joe's mission. It's your mission.
Yeah.
It's your charge. So it's yes, it's great to have it. People need to know who you are. You have a website. There is a public facing value and version, but the real important thing is that you walk out of the room and go, I know my marching. I know what the charge is, and I've got an articulated plan for how I'm going to achieve that, and I've got a way to come back and know whether or not I'm achieving it. That's it.
Yeah, that's similar to the process that I use where we'll frame around like, what do you want this world to look like, the bigger vision. And then I call the mission the how, just how are we going to get there, but very similar to the what, it's your charge. It's like how are we moving forward towards that bigger vision that we have for this world. That's interesting.
I call strategy the how. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So
you're breaking it down even further. Yeah.
Right. But here's the other thing I tell people, don't even worry about that. Like you get in a room and you can have arguments. Well, the strategy, the what, or is it the how? Is it a strategy or a tactic? Is it? And I go, no, stop. Like it doesn't matter. Here's the question. Do you know why you're here? Do you know what you're doing? Do you know what you're solving? Do you know how you're going to go about it? Like don't worry about the labels.
That's right.
That's not what's critical.
Yeah, I think it all will come together. Yeah, I think they do get bogged down in systems and processes. Boards often will. I actually did a board training recently where a board member was like, well, we're going to need some materials and we're going to need to know like this it's going to need to be written out. And I'm like, you're getting bogged down into the minutia, and that's not what we're here for. We're just going to have these high level conversations. You guys don't need to worry about all of that. The processes that undermine all of this, but they do, and that's because it's the low-hanging fruit. It's the easiest thing to dig into, and so it's easier than managing these big conversations about what are your values of your organization. Do you work with values by the way, Patrick? Do you do
Absolutely.
values with them? Yeah. Okay. It's part of the strategic planning.
It usually is. And what's interesting about the values piece is people often confuse values with culture.
Oh yeah.
Not confuse them, but try to figure out the relationship between them.
Yes, agreed.
And I've come to a framework on culture that includes the values.
Okay.
So the bigger picture for me is, what is your organization's culture? And my favorite definition of culture, that, believe it or not, I picked up in the PhD program, is the way we do things around here.
Yes, exactly.
So yeah, in fact, I think we talked about this recently at a summit. We talked about this definition a little bit. You were in that room as well. Yeah. But the way we do things around here, that's where you really find what your values are.
Yeah.
It's
Do you think values are at all aspirational, or should be at all aspirational, whereas culture might be what it already is, like you said, like the way we do things around here?
I think both are both.
Okay.
I think both culture and values. There's your current, we have values. We operate on a set of values.
Absolutely.
Today.
Yes.
We bring our individual values to an organization, whether it's the board or the staff. And then the organization has a history and a culture and an environment that exhibits certain values. But then there are also the aspirational ones, where organizationally you're saying, yeah, right now, this is the way we do things, but we'd like to do it like this. Yeah. We'd like to exercise. We strive for, people think of values, they think of those ethereal words: honesty, integrity, transparency, equity, inclusiveness, collaboration, right? All those things. So for me, that's half of the culture equation, the consciousness side of culture. Then there's the other half of culture, which is the practice side. What does it look like on the ground? How are you paying your people? What's the communication loop look like? Well, how does your org chart foster the performance of the mission? What are your systems? How do decisions get made in your organization? So there's the values, and then the reality practice on the ground that make up your culture, which is the way we do things around here. Yeah. It's both. Your values and your culture are what they are today, and people see it and they live it, and they look at the poster and they go, the values on this poster don't look like what I'm seeing. The audio doesn't match the video. Or, wow, we really are living this, but here's a great example of how we just lived out this, integrity piece, or whatever that might be. So we definitely, it's all a part of it.
Good. Well, let's talk a little bit, because I could actually go into values for days, because I feel like values are one of the most dismissed components of what is going on with an organization. And it's the first one that board members want to say, why do we have to get into this? And I'm like, that's it. Like, don't you understand? That's all of it. But so we can talk about that and get on the preaching, but let's talk more about the level 3 mission level measurement. And how do you frame mission statements, or recommend that staff and or executive directors and boards frame their missions so that they are more measurable? Like, how does that differ from these kind of pie in the sky mission statements that we see a lot of the time? How do we do that? And then maybe if you can even give us an example of what it realistically can look like a measure for a measurable mission statement.
Happy to do all of that. Interestingly enough, when we, part of the research was how are nonprofits doing this? Are they doing it? Which ones are doing it? And if so, what are they doing differently? But part of the research then was, what are the challenges? Why aren't there more doing it? Yeah. Right? So, and so my assumption going in, quite honestly, was that I was going to find everyone saying, man, it's because the systems required to measure at that level are just systems we don't have, and the staff competencies that are required to really measure data in that way and capture it and manage it. Or we would do it, but funders are not funding that kind of work for us. And when I did the literature side of the study to go out and see what's already been studied on it, there was a good bit of that out there. Nonprofits were saying, well, it's a capacity issue. And I heard some of that in my research, no doubt. but it was not the loudest piece. I was a little bit surprised and kind of relieved at
Yeah.
what I found the driver to be. And the driver number one was the crafting of the mission statement itself. It starts there. It's less an issue of, oh my gosh, but how do I have this complex data system to measure? We don't know how to do that. It's not actually that hard if your mission statement is framed in a way that you can hold yourself accountable to it. So, for example, we can talk about ethereal mission statements all day. Our mission, for example, I'm just going to pull one out. This isn't a real one, but it's very similar to some that you might have heard or seen. Our mission is to improve lives by advancing the development of our community's youth. Okay. Well, okay. Let's talk about improved lives. What is that? How are you measuring the level of improvement that you're making in lives? That's a big ask right there, right? Development of youth. What does that mean? How do you measure the development of youth? And that's let alone getting into the attribution question. Like, how much of the development of the youth of your community is due to your after-school tutorial program?
Right. All the other,
which is level 2. Level 3, though, is that mission level. So there's that ethereal nature. And Peter Drucker, the management guru that that everyone who's been in a business school has heard about. Drucker identified this a long time ago with corporate missions, that they're too nebulous and ethereal, and they're not conducive to knowing whether or not you achieved it. So we found that. The second thing we found, and I also just gave an example of this, is what we found to be a bifurcated mission. I know that's kind of a, ooh, what's that? It's real simple. It's a mission that's split into 2 parts inadvertently. And it's usually inadvertent. Sometimes it's intentional, but what it means is, and it's usually indicated by that word by. We do this by doing this. And you look at it and you scratch your head and go, okay, but wait, but which one is your charge if you were to break it down? And certainly since I did this research, I'm seeing these bifurcated missions all over the place. And I'm asking boards, if we removed the second half of this, if we took from the word by everything after that, if we removed it from your mission statement, is that really your mission? And about 4 times out of 5 right now, they're going, oh my gosh, yes.
Really?
Right?
Okay.
Yes, because you're it's like, which side are you holding yourself accountable to? In my study, in the dissertation document, one of the cases I looked at was the Nature Conservancy, and they realized, this was probably 15 years ago, they realized they had a bifurcated mission statement, and that they were measuring one part of it, and they had no metric for the other half of it. And I think it was now memory here, but to preserve life by protecting lands, basically. Okay. And they were measuring one piece of that, but not the other piece. They realized they didn't have a metric. So it's like, well, is our mission, we want to preserve life. That's the vision. That's our role, our charge is we need to protect the land on which that life can thrive.
And I'm guessing they were measuring how to protect the land, or how they were protecting the land. So they were able to use
because they can count the number of acres, and they can they can know, in some ways, the output is the outcome for them.
Yeah.
So they kind of realized that and sort of reshaped it. That's an example of a bifurcated mission, though. And that makes it more difficult to measure, because now you're measuring, like, which side is really your charge. And usually what it is the second half of a bifurcated mission is actually more the theory of change or the strategy. When you say we do this by doing this, the first half is, this is what we do. The second half is, this is how we do it. This is our approach to it.
Right.
Your approach is your strategy, not your mission. And it's really simple, but it's eye-opening. Then the last thing we found was that many organizations actually have their mission and vision statement flipped.
Yes, agreed.
One of them in particular that we researched, but this was a big, it's like, wow, they actually had metrics for their vision statement. but they didn't have metrics for their mission statement because they were flipped. The vision statement was more tangible, articulated, more framed. And the mission was, like rebuild lives. Wow. And so, but then the vision was these pieces of what their definition of a rebuilt life actually is.
Wow. Yeah.
And things that they measure. So it really found that it was kind of simple things, but why your mission statement matters. And it is because it is the foundation really for everything that you're doing. And if you don't have a firm grasp on whether or not you're achieving the charge, and it doesn't even have to be, I have a solid needle metric for every, but there does have to be some sort of indication, even if your level 2 metrics can point up to your level 3 metrics. That's good if you can define it. And the last thing I'll say is on that is it's about defining. So when you say we help create independent living for seniors, okay, well, if that's the mission, that's fine. But you have to define independent. And because you're the organization providing the services and with the expert view of this issue, you can define what you think independent is. So maybe it's a framework of 5 things. Maybe if an individual can feed themselves, clothe themselves, pay, be financially stable, maybe you have a framework for what independence is, and your programming helps them achieve those 5 things. Now you have a mission metric. You asked for an example. I'll give you one, and I don't know where this is. This is one I just looked up quickly. When I was doing my study, I kind of said, well, let me go and look at some, and I've looked at more than you'd want to know. But here's one called New Hope Housing.
Okay.
And New Hope Housing's mission is to provide life stabilizing, affordable permanent housing with support services for people who live on very limited incomes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
For me, that's a charge that is measurable. I can measure every piece of that.
Sure.
Provide. So let's take all the adjectives out and say provide housing and support services. I can measure what I'm providing. I can measure how much. I can measure how many houses did I put people in. All that's measurable. Then when you go to the adjectives, life stabilizing housing, affordable housing, permanent housing. Again, all things I can measure. Life stabilizing, I might have to put a definition on. Affordable probably is based on some formula that either the federal government uses or some states have self-sufficiency standards, but there's metrics for these things. And for people who live on very limited incomes, I can measure that. So the flip side, and by the way, their vision is to be an enduring institution serving the most vulnerable citizens. So their vision is more of an organizational vision than a community, which I'm okay with that. But the mission is measurable and it's within their scope of control. This is another part of the mission thing. When you say our mission is to end homelessness, okay, that's our mission. There's a much more limiting scope of control a single organization has on that. So if my mission is to provide housing, then everything I do to provide housing, that's in my scope of control. I didn't say how much housing. I didn't say in my mission that I'm trying to end homelessness. Right. I just said my charge is to provide housing for people in low income.
Yeah, I consider that more of a vision statement, right? Like if we're gonna to
end homelessness,
our vision is to end homelessness,
yeah,
and then how we're gonna do that.
It is, or it could be a mission. Like we're on a mission to end it. Like we want to eliminate homelessness. Okay. That is a mission, but that has to be more of an ecosystems mission. It can't just be a single organization. This is where nonprofits come into a community and go, that's where we talk about partnerships and collective impact. And there has to be a collective that says, we're going to collectively eliminate homelessness in our community. Yeah. So
it's bigger.
It's bigger. It's more difficult to measure. You have to have some shared metrics for it. We won't go into the collective impact framework, but you're now part of an ecosystem versus this sort of niche organization that is like a free clinic. Okay. A free clinic is pretty much a niche organization. We're providing critical health and medical services for people who can't afford it, uninsured, underinsured, poverty, whatever you want to call it. We're providing those services. That's niche. There's a, just like this, we're providing housing things, exact same thing. But if the mission of the free clinic is to create a healthier community, now we have, that's okay, but that's not something we're going to do alone.
Yeah.
We have to see what's our part of the ecosystem and how do we partner, and do the other players in the ecosystem even know they're in this ecosystem? That's where it gets really, that's where it gets complex and complicated, and social work is complicated and complex. So,
and that's a choice to go that direction, right? I mean, that's just part of the bigger conversation as a board and then as a community to go that direction. It's just but it needs to be intentional and thoughtful.
One of the 3 organizations in my study that rose to level 3, they rose to level 3, not because they have some sophisticated metrics, but because they limited their mission statement to something in their control. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's up to them. Like, this is our charge. This is our role. We know it's not the end all and the savior of the world, but it's needed. And we know the role we're filling, and we can measure the degree to which we're filling.
Great tip. That's a great tip, I think, for boards and executive directors to keep in mind as they're going through the process, and staff. So as we wrap up, I always like to I like to get very practical, tangible, like we can talk all about all this all day, but our executive directors are like, I'm so tired, I can barely move, right? And we want to give them something that's manageable at this point. If you can make some recommendations to executive directors who are listening to this and are like, okay, I know I need to do this, but where do I even start? What are the next steps in regards to getting this going? And how often should you be evaluating this mission, this vision, making sure that it's measurable? How do you set up systems to kind of have this accountability over time? What would those recommendations be?
Ooh, okay.
That's a lot, but I really want to give them just some steps they can implement today that'll get this ball started. I mean, and you and I both know this, some organizations haven't evaluated their mission or their vision in 10, 15 years and need to have that discussion.
Very true. Place. And this was another thing that sort of rang my bell when I did the research, is that almost all of the CEOs that I interviewed were not a part of their organizations, many of them not even alive when their mission statements were created, when their organizations were born. It's like, well, I wasn't there when, when you ask, why did this organization even come into existence? Like, I don't know. Well, how did the board come across the mission? I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't know. I just know this is what was handed to me. This is the mission.
This is what I do.
So that was, that's kind of interesting to know. I mean, I don't think that at every board meeting, I do think strategy needs to be the focus of every board meeting, but I don't think a revisiting of the mission is something that has to happen real frequently. I do think it periodically needs to be just affirmed, because it can change and it's okay to change it. The first thing I would say though, Jenny, is for anyone listening to just go grab your mission statement. You want practical, go get your mission and your vision and look at it and read it out loud and ask yourself, okay, how clearly defined is this telling us what our charge is? Tip 1 is replace the word mission with the word charge. By the way, it's a military term. Strategy it originated in a military context. And if you go back and look at the etymology of strategy and all that, we use words like, mission, tactics, right? All these things, they're military terms. So I like to say that your mission is your charge. Ask yourself as you're looking at your mission, does this really articulate a charge that people walk out of the room knowing this is what my charge is? This is what I've been charged with, and I can put my head around it. Then ask, here's a way I like to frame the question. If the IRS, who is giving you a tax break because you've made a social mission promise, and that's reality. If the IRS were to come and say, okay, we're vetting everyone's tax exempt status, we'd like evidence that you're achieving your mission, what would you tell them? That's the question. Or, if the community at large were all to sign a petition and say, oh, this doesn't happen, right? But if the community were to come together and go, hey, we want to know, like, we see this mission over here and the community's been donating to it and foundations have been funding it. We want to know, we want to see something. What would you tell them? And would you tell them, would you describe your work, or would you be able to say, we've moved this needle from here to here? What would that look like? Have that conversation with your board. It's just simple. Don't say, hey, let's build it. Let's get a flip chart or a whiteboard and build a new mission statement. Let's just say, if the IRS called this board and wanted evidence of mission advancement, mission achievement, what would we show them? What would you want to show them? What would we be capable of showing? I really would start right there.
Okay.
And then I'd look at, is my vision the aspiration and my mission the charge, or are they flipped? And then I would look at, is my mission bifurcated? We do this in order to do this, or we do this by doing this. And if so, and I had to choose one side of that, which side would I choose as the charge versus the other side being more about the how?
Yeah.
I would, I think nonprofits need to be capable of measurement. So evaluate your data management capabilities in your organization and do a needs assessment of what would we need in order to measure better what we're doing. And then another way to go about it would be to ask your marketing people or the marketing people on your board or your fundraising people, what would help you tell this story in such a compelling way and case that somebody would have a much harder time saying no to you? What is the return on a donor's investment? Without using emotional, like, well, we help kids. It's for the kids.
Right.
Yes, we know that, but what's the return?
Right.
In some measurable way. I know that's oversimplifying. We could get into the technicals of measuring and all that, but it really starts right there with those simplest of questions. And the number of leaders that I'm seeing ask those questions and go, wow, no, this doesn't, looking at our current mission statement. Yeah, this doesn't do it. And what's great is when I vet that with a board, put their mission statement up and say, does this align with what you've been talking about all day? Is this measurable? I love it when the answer is, yeah, it really does. We can do, boom, 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 boom. Then we move on. We go, good. We vetted it. We affirmed it. That's great. It's not that everybody has it wrong. It's just, let's question it.
Okay. And I recommend usually to my boards that they have a strategic question on their agenda for like a formal strategic question. And this could be one of those that we just pop it on there. Like you said, with the IRS, like, are we being accountable? Like, are we moving the needle? I think that's a really great place to start, and very easy for an executive director to say, hey, board chair, let's slap this on the agenda and see if we can't make that happen.
So many organizations are trying to figure out, how do we get our board discussions at a better generative level and have more meaningful conversations? Put them in 3 groups of round tables and throw that question at them and get people to talk about it, and no wrong answers. Let's just, I think it's a great idea.
I mean, don't board members want to contribute at that level? I know I do when I serve on a board, and I don't want to be just talked at the whole time. So give them that opportunity. Well, I appreciate so much you being here. I think we really gave our executive directors something to really chew on. And probably many of them have already been looking at that mission for years and have been like, I hate our mission. I hear that, right? When we go to them and we say, can you send me your mission, your vision, all your values, send me all that documents when I'm doing my document production. And they're like, oh, I hate our mission. So this is just a way to help them be able to have that conversation with the board and maybe start the process of getting it reframed so that we can measure impact, a return. I like that, a return for what we're doing for our communities and the solutions we're offering. So I really appreciate you coming today, and I hope to have you come back. I'd love to have you come back and talk about some leadership coaching potentially, and what coaches can do for our executive directors, CEOs, CFOs, and such. And I hope that you have a great rest of the day, and maybe I'll see you soon at another conference.
That would be awesome. Jenny, this has been an honor. I really appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to come on and spend some time with you.
Yeah, thanks.
All right.
Awesome, man.